Bragonier was diagnosed with dyslexia as a child. He faced academic obstacles in school and was perceived by others as different. His dyslexia inspired him to look deeper into the neuroscience of the disorder and the psychological, social, and emotional impact associated. After reading The Dyslexic Advantage by neuroscientists Fernet and Bragonier, Dean set out to do further research on the topic. In 2015, Dean founded NoticeAblitiy, where he developed, with the help of Harvard Business School and the Harvard School of Education, a curriculum for educators to better serve and uplift the dyslexic community. Dean is now a father to a son with dyslexia. What was your experience like growing up with dyslexia and now as an adult with dyslexia?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, early on, especially when I was, being introduced to the challenges of learning how to read, I felt that, even though I had the benefit of an early diagnosis and I had parents who were able to explain to me what dyslexia was and that it wasn't an indication of my intelligence, it still felt like it was a commentary on my self-worth and the fact that I had a difficulty learning to do something that everyone else could do effortlessly really made me question their explanation that it didn't mean I was stupid. I mean, I concluded that I was stupid. I am now very aware of not only the fact that dyslexia is not an indication of my intelligence, but that dyslexia actually carries with it certain advantages that I can channel that make me a very competitive professional. And, one of the things that I'm teaching my son, who's 12, about to be 13, is that I've figured out a way after all these decades of working incredibly hard for short durations and getting as much done as, neurotypical people would get accomplished in an 8-hour day. And so at the end of the journey, I mean, I don't want to say this is the end of the journey, but as a 47-year-old, I have learned to harness all of the harness all of the challenges of my youth and as a student and channel it into being a more productive and efficient adult in the workplace.
You started NoticeAblitiy, which is an organization dedicated to unlocking the dyslexic experience. Can you tell us a little bit about, or tell us a little bit more about NoticeAblitiy and what you guys do?
And so what we do is we produce 3 different curricula that focus on the 4 top professions for dyslexics that we've chosen, which is entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, and the arts. And so we've created content with the help of Harvard University, and we distribute that content to schools around the world who then empower students with dyslexia through this strength-based approach, as opposed to simply looking at these kids as the struggling readers, the problem, the behavioral problem kids, which is often a manifestation of frustration in the classroom.
Absolutely. So can you get, and I know you had mentioned, and it's on your website as well, so you guys work with Harvard University School of Business as well as the School of Education, but in terms of these curricula, what do these curricula consist of in order to help with, the social emotional growth, for instance? What are the specifics, quote unquote?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. No, very rarely do people really focus on logistics. Each one of our courses is 20 hours long, and it's divided into 2 parts. The first part is the content, right? What is entrepreneurship? How do you build a business plan? How do you make a business presentation? All of that is housed on an online learning platform where I am teaching, and most specifically, I can use different modalities of teaching that the dyslexic learner prefers, meaning graphs and pictorial imagery, or use the spoken word, as opposed to burying all that information behind text, right? So students are able to self-pace their learning by watching those videos online, but the social and emotional component comes when they work in groups in the classroom.
So you're a father to a son with dyslexia. How do you incorporate, with what you do and your learned experiences into your son's education and learning?
Yeah, so much of, having had the good fortune to have a successful academic career as a student with dyslexia, I'm able to sort of condense a lot of the tricks of the trade, a lot of the efficiencies that I had to adopt to survive and to thrive academically. I now have a pretty concise methodology that I can impart to my son. And we're homeschooling right now for a variety of reasons, the pandemic being one of them. But the idea is that I don't want to say they're cheat sheets, because cheat insinuates something that you're doing something to let's call them academic hacks. Okay, I'm just teaching him these really quick sort of condensed tools to get through academics in a really successful and productive way that reduce the anxiety and yield higher results. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. Thank God I have the opportunity to guide him through this process right now, because if he was off in a classroom, he would be having to find these solutions on his own. It takes longer, it's more frustrating. So, it's that goes back to the shared experience of struggle that there's nobody on earth who hasn't experienced struggle.
Sure.
The idea of what did you learn from it, and then can you somehow package and contextualize that and share it with people who are going through the same struggle. So
what advice would you give parents who have children with dyslexia?
Your child will show you what they are passionate about. Supporting that passion allows them to derive a sense of purpose and to become extremely knowledgeable about that particular drive or passion. And when they become so knowledgeable and experts, if you will, in that particular passion, asking them about it, becoming the student of your child and allowing them to share their knowledge allows them to understand that they are fully capable of learning, that they are fully deserving of your time and attention and respect, and most specifically is going to combat what they're getting on a daily basis, which is being in an environment where they are uninspired and where they're experiencing defeat and that's the classroom for them. Mm-hmm. Creating an environment at home where you can applaud and celebrate what they find of interest is going to translate to a greater sense of their own efficacy and confidence. Now, obviously within reason, a lot of one thing that I often get is from parents is, a child with dyslexia will sometimes escape into gaming. And I'm not a huge fan of gaming because I see it as a form of possibly self-medication if it's abused, if it goes from recreational into habitual.
What do you mean by gaming? You mean in terms of games like video games and that type of stuff? Okay.
Video games. No, I'm not talking about physical athletics. That's a
No,
whole.
no, 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 no. I figured that. Yeah.
Yeah, gaming is. I can't get them off of the gaming console. Well, actually, behind gaming is a whole world of software engineering and coding, right? And the dyslexic is who resonates with gaming, and we know that the dyslexic strong suits present themselves particularly well in software coding. Why, as parents, can't we find an online software coding camp or a local one when the world returns to some sort of normalcy and say, great, you love gaming? Why don't you learn to write games? And by the way, software engineering is a fantastic professional pursuit. And there's all sorts of technical colleges that allow you to focus on these sort of things. So if we can take that passion that at first glance seems like, it's not really productive, and find what behind it we can encourage them to pursue and find strength from, then you're taking something that might be on the verge of self-medicating in a negative way to being a path of passion. That's an extreme example. But if the kid is like a Lego master and he's building these structures, okay, that's architecture. That's a form of engineering. Mm-hmm. Let's see what's behind it and feed those passions.
I think that's great advice. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was lovely.